everybody. I am live on Instagram for the first time, and I'm thrilled to do this because I've been talking about experimenting with new technologies and trying new tools and pushing all of my agents to do that. So it's time to walk the talk. So I'm here trying to figure this out together. And today we are going to talk with Eric Jacobs, incorporating him now to this live. And we are going to be discussing all the small print in the contracts that forever we have never paid attention to. Hi, Eric, how are you? It's great to have you in the live. How are you? Okay, while Eric gets incorporated, let's continue. I was saying that in our real estate contracts, there were all these fine print that we never paid attention to or looked too much, too thoroughly, because we never needed them. But now with what we're going through with the coronavirus and all these different situations that we have, it's becoming more and more relevant, and we all need to be educated and informed. We need to know what are our options, what we can do, and what we can do. Whether you are a real estate agent or a client, a buyer, a seller, it's super important that we are all informed and we know where we are standing. So, Eric, how are you doing today?
Hey, Patricia, good. This is a fun experience. Thanks for the invite.
Yes, it's an experiment that we're doing together. The good side of all this thing this craziness that we are living is we are learning new things. So I'm sure that you're getting a million calls and emails from agents with all these crazy new situations that we've never seen before.
Yep. So in law school, we learned the concept of force majeure, and then we draft it into all of our contracts, and it almost never, ever comes up. I have taken more phone calls regarding force majeure in the last 10 days than I have in the last 20 years. So it's been an interesting experience to get a chance to kind of talk realtors through the thinking and buyers and sellers. And I'm here to answer any questions I can for you about it today.
Sure. So I'm getting also a ton of questions from my agents, and when I discuss this with other brokers, everybody's on the same page. So one of the very common questions that I have now is, what happens when there is a lease that is executed and the tenant, for example, does not, it's executed, but it has to start, let's say, in a week from now. The tenant, with everything that's going on, either doesn't want to move forward with the lease, or the building is not allowing move-ins. What are the options that the parties have, and what should the real estate agent do in a case like that?
Sure. So let's take a step back and get an understanding of what force majeure is and what it isn't. And the easiest thing as far as what it isn't is force majeure is not a cure for fear or uncertainty. So the fact that all of this stuff is going on, people are uncomfortable, they're scared, it's unfortunate, but that by itself is not an excuse to get out of a contract. Force majeure is designed so that when there is a circumstance that someone can't circumvent, or a circumstance that prevents them or impedes them from doing what they're supposed to do, they don't automatically go into breach. So in the example that you gave, for example, if the tenant doesn't want to go forward because they're afraid, because they're uncomfortable, because they're in a high-risk group, fill in the blank of the various reasons people have explained, I would say that's not a force majeure issue. That's a personal issue. If the tenant doesn't go forward because they can't get into the building, I would say that clearly is a force majeure issue. And what happens as a result of a condition really depends entirely, and I mean entirely, on what's in the contract. So most contracts, all of our purchase and sale contracts, for example, have force majeure provisions. If there is no force majeure provision, then you have to resort to some other legal theories that get kind of complicated. I think the big takeaway for the agent, though, is that what you should do is not get involved in it. It is a legal question from the minute that it comes up. So the best thing that you can do for your clients is, if it's a buyer, one party who's claiming they can't perform because of force majeure, you forward that to your client. You say, here's a copy of the notice that I've gotten. I urge you to seek the advice of a counsel. If your client is the one who wants to send the notice, you should not be drafting that notice for them. They should send the notice on their own, and you should encourage them to seek the advice of counsel. I've gotten quite a few letters this week from people trying to get out of contracts that could have been better worded. And because of the way that they're worded, they've probably increased the chance that they're in breach instead of increasing the chance that they're excused because of force majeure. So I think it's all based on the facts, really.
Let me repeat that, because I think it's so super important that I want everybody to hear it from both of us. Please, everybody who is an agent, do not play attorney. This is a moment where things are extremely delicate. It's never a good idea to give legal advice, but particularly in these times that we are so open to different interpretations or conflicts. We really want to make sure that our clients are protected. So in any of these circumstances, follow the advice that Eric just gave. Make sure that you recommend to your client that they consult with their attorney, and it is the attorney the one who has to draft the notification for the other party.
Yep.
Okay, great. So another question that I've been receiving is there any disclaimer that the agents should be using if they choose to continue to do showings now?
You mean in terms of not being responsible if somebody gets sick or something?
Yes, I got a question from an agent yesterday.
Well, first of all, I do not believe that realtors are essential. So at least in Miami, I don't think you can do showings now. And I'm fairly certain that the board has shut them all down. Even if you could, I would recommend that you don't. But I don't think there's a theory of liability that I would be overly concerned about. And I certainly don't think that you could disclaim away that theory in a way that I think would hold up. But as far as I know, at least in Dade County, you shouldn't be doing showings right now.
Well, the latest that I've read is that the National Association of Realtors is trying to get real estate and realtors incorporated in the category of essential businesses, because people still need a place to live. And if your lease is up and they're kicking you out, you need to be able to find a new place.
Yeah,
so,
I heard that as well.
We're waiting on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think for the moment, I don't think they can, but I heard that as well.
Okay. Are virtual showings okay now? Like if an agent goes to the property, not with the client, he goes by himself or by herself and does FaceTime or any of the current options for virtual showings?
So I think you have a couple of things to consider there. One is whether the realtor should be engaged in their business by leaving the house and going to this other property under the current order. My understanding, at least at the moment, is that for the most part the answer is no. I'd probably recommend against it. Certainly an existing owner, if they wanted to record, let's say, a virtual tour of sorts around the house, and then the agent dispensed it electronically, I think that would be okay. My only concern is that if you have somebody get a contract relying on what's been depicted in a video, colors have a way of bleeding, things have a way of not quite being what you hope they might be that you saw on camera. And I would have some concerns, having had issues like this come up in the past, not related to the current circumstance, that somebody would claim later that what they saw was not what reality was. So, I'd be pretty careful about it, but as far as I'm concerned, I think at the moment, my best advice to agents is sit tight and wait and see what the best direction from the government is. These next few weeks are going to be pretty hairy.
We just got someone that sent a question and asked what happens with properties which are in a lockbox. Is it okay to allow a prospect that is requesting to see the property, access to the property?
So when you say a prospect, I assume the only person you would allow off a lockbox is another agent. Again, I would defer to what the current board, your local board for those that aren't in Miami, your local board's directions are. If realtors are allowed to work, then they're allowed to work. Whether it's on lockbox or you giving them access wouldn't change my thinking one way or the other.
And if it is a direct client?
I mean, I guess in my experience, it's fairly unusual that an agent would allow someone who's not licensed to go into a property on lockbox. Maybe things have changed a bit.
I'm just passing on questions as they, I'm getting texts from agents that have joined the call and
so
trying to address all of them.
Under the current orders that are at least relevant to most of the agents I work with, people should not be out touring houses. For the most part, there are some exceptions under the order. Maybe it could be pulled under. So if they were under one, I don't see any reason why an agent couldn't give them access.
Okay, I have here the same question from Diana. How about a vacant property? Can we do the virtual tour? I guess that's just what you have responded. Yeah. And I have another one here from Laura. Is the eviction process still allowed?
So yes, you can file actions, but as a practical matter, no one's being evicted right now, and the sheriffs are not executing on writs of possession right now. So I would be very surprised if any evictions meaningfully move forward the next 60 days.
Okay, I got another question. What if the tenant claims financial duress, is that how you pronounce it, and cannot come up with a deposit?
Yeah, so, the discussion that we're having here, just to be clear, is informational. It's not intended as legal advice. Every situation's different. My reaction with regard to a lot of my commercial landlords that I represent right now is the obligation to pay rent is not impaired by the current circumstance. The inability to make money might be, but that's why one should have insurance, at least in the commercial context, for loss. In the residential context, I think the fact that you can't pay rent is a contractual problem. I don't think you're excused from paying rent effectively because you've lost your job because of coronavirus.
Okay, that's all. This information is so useful for all of us. What are the other situations, unusual situations or questions that you are getting?
Well, the main thing that I've seen happen lately has been somebody a week or two ahead of closing saying that they want to terminate because of force majeure. And I've had a couple of circumstances where agents have sent these messages on their client's behalf. The thing is, force majeure has to prevent you from performance. So how you could say now you won't close in 2 weeks would strike me as not advisable. I think if it's force majeure, we're going to have to wait till we get backed up against that time. And if closings can happen, then they can happen. What I would say is we have surprised a lot of people by telling them and in fact showing them we can do, in many cases, 100% of the real estate transaction online now. We now, as of January of this year, there's something called remote online notary that allows even promissory notes, mortgages, and the whole loan document package to be signed effectively electronically. Some lenders don't accept the note and the mortgage, and they still have to be wet signed. And there are some creative ways around that too. So what I'm seeing is agents telling people that things can't be done when that's factually wrong. And by telling them that, clients are relying on what the agents are telling them. And I think that could create liability for the agent down the road. Okay,
so again, we need to check with the attorney. Omar just typed a question and is asking, in a purchase and sale contract, are all dates still enforceable?
Yes, all dates are enforceable, but any dates could be subject to force majeure.
Can you expand a little on that?
Yeah, so if you are unable to complete your inspection, for example, because right now you're in lockdown, that inspection period would be subject to the force majeure provision. So the force majeure provision can extend up to 7 days after the event that's preventing you from doing whatever it is you're supposed to do, up to 30 days. So theoretically, the inspection period could get pushed out, the closing date could get pushed out. Everything can be pushed out because of this force majeure condition. The thing that you have to remember is if the closing then goes beyond 30 days, then either party can cancel.
Okay, okay. And same goes if I guess if there's a mortgage and the bank is taking longer, is there any provision that they can use to extend the financing contingency?
So if it depends. That's a complicated one without having more facts. In short, if there is a financing contingency, if you have not yet given a loan approval, and if there is a force majeure condition, I would say yes. If you've already given a loan approval, I would say maybe. It really depends on what the details of the situation are, I think, for me to have a strong opinion one way or the other. I think the most important thing to do is if your client gets into this situation, you have to encourage them more than ever to reach out to a lawyer to get some advice, because even if it's in a gray area, you may be able to help your client get themselves into a more black or white area, which is, you know, certainly more desirable for clients these days that are really seeking certainty more than anything.
Sure. We just got a question from Jacqueline asking if an inspection company is considered an essential business.
So I don't have all of the various Dade and Broward and Miami orders in front of me. I have looked at them. My recollection is that they're not, but I'd want to look at the order again before telling you for sure.
Okay. Then another question that we've got is someone brought up that there is some rule, and I wanted to check with you if it's accurate or not, that currently if an association does not respond whether with an approval or a denial of approval for an application within 30 days, it is automatically deemed approved. Is that correct?
So I'm not aware of a specific rule or statute to that effect, but even if there was one, I would say right now force majeure has to be a consideration under all circumstances, so I would be hesitant to take that position on behalf of a client either way right now.
Okay, so we still cannot have someone move in without the approval of the building. Like
at the moment, you can't get title insurance that way. As a title agent, if you need condo approval, I got to have it, and if I can't get it, we can't insure it.
Okay. Carlos is asking if the seller is overseas, can he sign and notarize the sellers online? I guess, can you sign and notarize the seller online?
Yes is the short answer. You get into, will the other party accept it? Is there a lender involved? You know, will they accept it? But strictly speaking, yes, we do it all the time.
And I'm not sure I understand the question. He says yes, depending on the title company. No, I guess that this is across every company.
Some title companies are more equipped to do this stuff than others, but any title company that's equipped to do it can do it.
Okay. What happens, if I recall correctly, I heard that the online notarization, the remote notarization, the person has to be a U.S. resident or citizen. What happens when it is a foreign national?
It depends. There have been some exceptions made as of late under a Supreme Court order with regard to the way documents are notarized online. I've not had to deal with an issue regarding somebody otherwise not being eligible. I think the issue turns on verifying the ID, but honestly, I'd have to confirm because I don't think I've had a circumstance where I've had somebody who isn't a U.S. person do it. Let me take a look. A second, hold on. I don't recall Florida having a specific requirement. Let me get back to you on that one, Patricia, because that's a good question. I just don't remember.
We'll have plenty of other live sessions to go back to this. So.
Yeah, I'll double check on that. I don't want to give you the wrong answer.
Okay. Any other unusual situation that you've seen in the past weeks?
No, nothing more unusual than what we're going through right now with Corona. So we're just trying to get deals closed and keep things moving along as best we can. I think the most unusual thing I see is how many people are still out in the street right now.
Yes, yes, absolutely. On a brighter note, we've had quite a few transactions that were entirely done remotely, online, digitally, virtually, however you want to call it.
That's
but
pretty cool.
Nobody has been in touch. The client has not seen the property in person. And this goes back to what you mentioned about whether there can be some issues when someone later says, well, I imagined that this was going to be this way or that way. I think that now it is so important to make sure that the agents get something from the other side in writing, accepting the FaceTime, the video, or whatever technology they are using, especially now that we have all these tools where you can be connected with the other party on the other side of the world, and they can ask you, please open the door of the refrigerator, or show me, turn this on, turn it off, and it's really like being in person almost. So it is so important to make sure that the party that is relying on a video, on a FaceTime, or any of these virtual technologies acknowledges that they are accepting that, correct?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and actually would recommend that the brokerages have a document like that at the brokerage level.
Okay. Okay, I know a good attorney that we can ask. So
happy to help.
And I read also that you guys are doing curbside closings where the client goes in his or her car, does not have to enter your office, doesn't do anything, and they, from the window of their cars, they will sign with their own pen something, and in case it needs to be done in person.
Yeah, we do that. We actually had one closing where a person was quarantined, so we had a notary outside through a window witnessing the signing and then notarizing basically by passing it through the window.
That's very cool.
We do whatever we have to get the deals closed.
Well, definitely we have to admit that in real estate, we are seeing a lot of creativity, and we are very quickly adapting to the new reality. So, so far we're seeing a lot of activity, fortunately.
Yep.
So, and I guess you're very busy as well.
We are very busy, thankfully.
Good. So, guys, for those of you who are watching this, anybody has any other question? It says, I had a closing with Eric this week. We had both sides. It went great. Thanks to Sarah. Thanks, Eric.
Oh, that's nice to hear. Thank you very much. I'll pass that along to Sarah.
Great. Any other questions, guys? Anything else that we haven't brought up? Okay, I guess that that this is, it says force majeure is not a natural disaster. They said it does not include a virus. Is this true for Florida?
Wherever that came from, whoever got that information, that would be, I guess I'm going to say I would disagree with that. So force majeure is driven by the contract definition that's in the contract. So whatever the contract says force majeure is, that's what force majeure is. Usually force majeure provisions say a act of God, which we could argue about whether a virus is, but they often have kind of catch-all language like, or any other circumstance outside of the reasonable control of one of the parties. In either one of those cases, I think force majeure would fit, and it's not a function of Florida, that's general contract drafting, I think. And either way, as a practical matter, I think you're going to have a hard time convincing a judge, if you wanted to fight it, that this is not a force majeure.
Okay. Great. I'm getting a lot of messages thanking you for doing this.
My pleasure.
Saying it's great. We love these live talks. great information. So I guess that we've successfully managed to do our first live together.
That was
it's
fun.
an honor to have you join me in this experiment.
I appreciate the invite, Patricia.
And just to summarize, guys, oh, someone is sending you a happy belated birthday from Anka.
Thanks. Very kind of you.
So to summarize, force majeure applies where there is actually some situation that prevents the parties from performing their duties according to the contract, not to a personal state of mind. A client cannot say, hey, I'm feeling anxious about what's going on and I changed my mind. Eric, stop me and correct me if I'm wrong, but
No, you're right. That's right on.
To summarize it. So this is something important to know. And the most important thing to all agents, whether they are my agents, agents from any other company, please, guys, don't put yourself in a situation where you are jeopardizing your license by giving legal advice. Make sure, especially in these circumstances, that when you need to, when any advice that you have to give to your client has to be check with your attorney. Any of these circumstances that we have been discussing needs to have the attorney to draft any note, any notification, any, you know, in any conflict that arises. Hopefully we won't be seeing conflicts if we act cautiously, if we act mindfully, and if we take all the precautions that we are supposed to take. We are going to navigate this together. We're going to get through, and hopefully stronger than ever, because now we'll have all these tools on top of the personal interaction.
Yep.
So thank you, Eric, so much. Send you a big virtual hug.
You too, sweetie. It's nice talking to you.
And thanks everybody for joining us. Have an amazing
Hope to see you
day.
all soon. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.